The biggest geopolitical change in decades appears to be about to occur. India, which until recently was seen as a middle ground between Beijing and Washington, is now leaving the United States and is slowly encroaching on China. An entire culture has undergone a complete realignment toward its eastern neighbor, which started as a commercial spat over Trump's tariffs. The effects of this action on Americans' global security and policy will be enormous. New Delhi saw the Trump administration's August move to slap extra tariffs on Indian exports as a political embarrassment rather than an economic one. The Financial Times claims that by September, talks between U.S. and Indian delegations to lower tariffs had already come to a standstill. They were found to be viewed as a threat rather than an ally, officials told the outlet. This prompted a review of foreign policy, which in a few weeks produced a landmark ruling. India enters into direct military contracts with China for the first time in its contemporary history. Kyodo News and the South China Morning Post claim that this goes beyond simply investing in specific technologies or small arms. The contracts include everything from frigates and submarines to next-generation fighter jets and air defense systems. This is an unimaginable step for a nation that was engaged in extensive negotiations with the U.S. just 6 months ago to increase military cooperation. However, as Bloomberg points out, the logic of long-standing conflicts is giving way to geopolitical logic. With their militaries successfully gauging strength along the line of control, China and India were on the verge of border conflicts in the Himalayas until recently. The tone has drastically changed now. According to New Delhi insiders quoted by The Hindu, they are aware that the U.S. is unwilling to take Indian interests into account and only utilizes India as a pawn in its war against China. In light of this, forging tighter connections with Beijing no longer seems like treachery, but rather like a sensible decision. Washington is stunned. The Atlantic Council's experts refer to this as the most Trump suffered a severe geopolitical setback when Germany withdrew from a number of trade accords early in his first term. When India is lost, China obtains access to a vast market, scientific talent, and an army of more than 1 million active people, while the United States loses a vital Indo-Pacific ally. For this reason, the idea of a new invincible alliance has been the subject of much discussion in American media lately. If China and India join forces in it, constitutes a fundamental disturbance of the strategic equilibrium in the military-technical domain. The economic building blocks are no longer the only ones involved. This military combination is strong enough to take on any alliance in the West. Nikkei Asia has pointed out that the pact includes cooperation defense technology initiatives in addition to arms, which is quite worrisome. Engineers from India will have access to Chinese advancements in electronic warfare systems and hypersonic missiles, and Chinese businesses will be allowed to enter India's satellite communications and telecommunications markets. The military balance in Asia could be drastically altered by this exchange. According to the article, the Pentagon is publicly voicing its concerns. A former advisor of the National Security Council, quoted by according to Reuters, the U.S. could have to deal with two giants operating as one entity inside the White House. According to Politico, there is a lot of disagreement over whether to keep applying pressure to India or look for quick solutions to restore normalcy. However, time is running short. Global Times and other Chinese media have already publicly referred to India as a new strategic partner, highlighting how shared future objectives are replacing old conflicts. Delegation visits to Beijing are framed by Indian state television networks as a historic turning point, which makes Donald Trump seem inevitable. It appears to be a disastrous situation. His tactics of exerting pressure on China and its friends are failing, as one of the biggest allies of the United States just quits the game. Should Trump fail to act swiftly to restore New Delhi's consequently, America runs the possibility of having to contend with the formation of an unbeatable coalition of two of the world's most populous nations, each possessing sizable armies and robust economies. All of this suggests that world politics are undergoing a seismic change. Today, a situation that looked like fiction yesterday is coming to pass. China is gaining a partner who can drastically change the world, while the United States is losing India. Balance of power worldwide as well as in Asia. India is no longer the third party the U.S. depended on to counterbalance China in the modern world. In full face of the world community, New Delhi is moving forcefully in the direction of Beijing. This change's economic background is evident. Following Trump's tariffs, Indian exporters were struck with force. Business standards state that India lost more than $12 billion in August and September alone as a result of fewer textile, pharmaceutical, and IT services being shipped to the U.S. It was a hint that Washington no longer saw New Delhi as a privileged partner for an Indian economy already beset by increasing unemployment and inflation. For this reason, Indian officials looked for alternatives right away. China turned out to be the most practical option. First, it provides access to its sizable domestic market, where contracts for reasonably priced medications have already been signed by Indian pharmaceutical businesses. Second, because Beijing provided credit lines to fund infrastructure projects in India. This is more than $50 billion, Kaishan said. Diplomatic symbolism, however, is the key component. For the United States friends, this is concerning. Analysts in Australia and Japan claim that the Quad alliance is essentially becoming obsolete. The regional counterbalance to China will fall apart if India distances itself from Washington and Tokyo. Being aware that the establishment of a Beijing-New Delhi axis would put more pressure on its own exports, South Korea exercises caution. The response from Europe is especially instructive. Der Spiegel claims that Brussels feels that losing India would jeopardize any Western efforts to unite in a coalition for democracy against authoritarian governments. French diplomats publicly admit that they caution the U.S. from cornering India. The government's new approach is evoking heated emotions within India. With China as a partner who will neither lecture or impose restrictions, nationalists cheer the decision. But the liberal opposition highlights the dangers, claiming that India is growing reliant on a nation with which it has been at odds for many years. However, the public's attitude is evident. Indians embrace actions that make India a more equal player on the world stage because they are sick of the U.S. treating them like a junior partner. This might all turn into a problem for Donald Trump. Political debacle. The loss of India tarnishes his reputation as a tough negotiator in the face of impending elections. It has already been dubbed the century's greatest strategic blunder by American critics. China's media, meanwhile, somberly proclaim that America has lost Asia. It is difficult to exaggerate the strategic implications. This is not the